Well, two things before I really get down to things. I want to thank Nancy yet again for getting this together. You just have been so stalwart, so giving. It's just, I love it. So, and I love you too. The other thing is I just want to let everybody know I am not feeling really well. I had a very difficult night last night, so I'm not really on my A game. So I'm gonna let you guys, make sure that I don't really screw up, particularly about such an important topic as white privilege. Also, I don't know if any of you had a chance to review the rules of our interchange. They're fairly straightforward, confidentiality, respect, etc. But if anyone has any questions, you let me know. I really appreciated, there you go. I really appreciated 2 or 3 people saying, yeah, I don't know about this language. And we all got together and reached a consensus, unanimity about what should be included. So there are the brave space, safe space rules. Thanks, Nancy. So if there are any questions, let me know. But we're here to talk about white privilege. When I think of those two words, white and privilege, particularly when I first learned them, I was like, oh yeah. And in a way, when I looked at white, well, are you guys trying to make things black and white? Aren't you kind of trying to foster togetherness and understanding? So to the extent that you said white, and, frankly, I don't see any of you out there who are really white, but are you? The other word I think, which can be particularly galling for people, is privilege. I think a lot of people are like, I've struggled too. No one gave me a ticket to college or wealth or whatever. It makes it sound as if anytime a white person earns something, I don't know, a degree or whatever, it's like it's not really earned. So I think that white privilege phrase is meant to stir feelings. And I think the sense, and I don't know if it's just me, and it's been a while since I was first introduced to this concept, things have calmed down, a little bit more. So, it's more than flesh-colored Band-Aids. Remember, I don't know if they still call them Band-Aids flesh-colored. I don't know. It's more than walking into a store and, there's white folk food. It really even isn't individual acts of either conscious or unconscious racism. Those can add up, but that's not what the concept of white privilege is really about, at least as I understand it. It's set in the, shall we say, financial, social, cultural, real estate structure, how voting happens, racial profiling, healthcare disparities. And someone mentioned, by the way, the New York Times, and also OPB just had a special on healthcare disparities with women who give birth. And the statistics for Black women, and particularly wealthy Black women, are appalling. I think it bespeaks the underlying stress that's just there all the time. But that isn't my field of expertise, but I will tell you that really shocked me. So it's like a built-in advantage that we didn't necessarily cause. We may foster, and that's something to think about. I like to think of it as it's the power of normal. You know, what's normal? It looks a lot like us. The power of the benefit of the doubt. You know, seeing a Black person walk in the streets, particularly male with a hoodie. If it were us, we would benefit from the benefit of the doubt. So the power of normal, the power of the benefit of the doubt, and the power of accumulated power. So those are the, to me, those are the three pillars that I think about when I think about white privilege. And I thought we would start off. I'm going to shortly have us go into, you know, our first batch, and I've got thinking about two short, you know, smaller groups. But maybe we can have a few comments before we go to get us going, rather than just me pontificating. But do you believe there is such a thing as white privilege? Have you experienced it? Is it being dealt with appropriately? So I don't know if this is, again, this is the recorded portion of the program. So if everybody kind of would like to just immediately go into the small groups, that's okay too. So I think we should go into the small groups. Yes. Okay, let's do that. Well, why don't we start? How many groups were there? 4 or 5? Why don't we start with group 5? And if I think I see Linda raising her hand.
Well, I think that was my group, if I remember correctly.
I think it was.
So do you want to know what we talked about a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, we agree there's white privilege. And at least I mentioned that some part of the definition of white privilege is you don't always notice when you have it. That's, I think, the privilege part. But we were 3 that had lived in areas and gone to high school and school in areas that were very white. So one thing that was mentioned was how that can contribute to stereotypes of any others, if we're not familiar with people that. I noticed we talked a little bit about redlining. One person lived in Los Angeles area as a young person and knew about that. And I was also talked a little bit about how there's some people now that seem to feel they're owed more in life because they're white. I mean, isn't that the definition of privilege? And we talked a little bit about the increase in people who feel it's okay just to hate other people for various reasons. And there was an example at a school here in Oregon just recently about that. A student through social media, it sounds like, using very racist terms to describe some of the other students. So, and how hurtful that is. Kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Insightful. 4.
Marie, Mary, or Nadine?
Well, we talked about, we've all felt that there was white privilege, and we defined it more as always expecting to be treated kindly or well.
Mm-hmm.
And that expectation isn't true for a lot of other people who aren't white. And we talked about being whether you were in a segregated community, a closed community, whether the laws were written to enhance white privilege, and whether there have been changes.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have white privilege.
Can you think of an example of one of those laws? It might be hard to.
Social Security, when it was first set up under Roosevelt, it changed, but when it was set up for Roosevelt, all part-timers were not allowed to have, Social Security wasn't collected for part-timers. And that was because the Southern Democrats wanted to make sure that the Blacks who did part-time work down in the South would never have a pension. So they'd always have to work.
And also
And that's
agricultural
been changed.
workers.
Not
Yeah,
included. They
agricultural
would be considered
workers
part-time also, or part seasonal.
and maids. Domestics and agricultural workers. Duh, who were they? Yeah, good example, good example.
And that was changed in 68, but it took an awful long time. And I'm sure that there's some little glitches on the books anyway.
I'm sure. I think we're to 3.
Arlene and Regina?
Yes, we are here. Well, I'll speak up. We did have a person of color on our threesome, and that was insightful. We all agreed that there was, well, the two of us that are white agreed there was white privilege, and we did talk about inherited wealth and what a difference that has made for white white people versus BIPOC people. And at the very end, I went to a high school that had no people of color, and I didn't think twice about that. I didn't even question that. And I'm sure none of my friends did either. So it's unconscious. It's privilege that we get on a regular basis, a daily basis, that we're not even aware of. Yeah, that's what I heard.
Interesting. Yeah. What number are we?
2.
4, 5, 2?
Too.
Bessie, Lisa, or Susan? Lisa Berner.
You're muted, Lisa.
Yep. Okay, so we also talked about the fact that we thought there is white privilege, and we each talked about why we thought that. We talked about our high schools growing up, and Susan recommended some good books, one of which turns out I have on my shelf, so I'm going to read it now.
Yeah.
What is it called?
That's
I
a
couldn't read
classic.
it.
It's called Waking Up White.
Waking Up White. Okay.
Yeah, it's a classic. Yes.
And it's called by Debbie Irving.
Yep.
And a sweet little girl on the front eating ice cream. So good for her.
The other book we mentioned was Caste, which is a terrific book, and the analogy that I found so powerful when I read the book about having a house that has a rotten foundation and a basement, and you can paint the top as much as you like, but until you deal with the basement, you really haven't dealt with it. And that, I think, is the problem in this country, that we keep painting the top and we don't want to look in the basement. And we have to deal it up. The paradox that's been in this country from the very beginning, the contrast between chattel slavery and the ideals in the Declaration of Independence. That just a thing we've never dealt with. And in my own experience, I think I'm older than a lot of you guys, but graduating from high school in 61, I learned nothing about any of this. And I also went to a small white high school in Maine, and I didn't meet a black person until I went to a real black person from the South until I went to Alaska in 67. It was like, a whole nother world for me. But I'm happy that you're having this topic, and I'm really pleased to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're to my group.
Yes, your group.
But I told my group that I talk too much. It's up to them.
So Kay or Diana, it's up to you.
Yes, I accidentally leaned on my mouse pad and brought up another screen on front of this. just as we were being booted back into the main room, Trish was going, "Why don't you ask that question?" And I think this was the question that she wanted me to ask. We were talking about white privilege where we live now. And I live in Grants Pass, which Josephine County is 99 point something% white. And I just sort of asked hypothetically, is it white privilege if there are no people of color around? You know, I mean, and you could argue, of course, that it's white privilege why there are not very many people of color in Oregon since it was planned that way. But in terms of the fact that I can get a mortgage here, is that white privilege, or is that just because I live here, there's nobody to push out of the way, I guess, maybe. I don't know quite how to explain it.
It's an excellent question. I think one of the things as we think about white privilege, it's not just Black folk. I still have problems with BIPOC. That phrase kind of bothers me, but you know, think of the indigenous people. Think of the Japanese internment camps. I mean, you know, anyway, that got me back on my high horse. I mean,
and what about the Latino? Isn't there a Latino population in the Grants Pass area or in Southern Oregon?
Exactly.
It's still pretty small. I mean, everything seems small to me. I came from Houston and Dallas. Okay, so my roommates in college were Latino. More than half the people in my workplace when I retired were either Black or Asian. So this place is just mind-boggling to me when I walk around.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people also think that this kind of thing only happens in the South. But unfortunately, I think it is like truly embedded in our entire financial system.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Linda kind of alluded to this, but I was giving an example in our session about teenagers. My coworker has a 15-year-old daughter. She is very tan, very dark, so something that their heritage-wise don't know. She got a video at lunch today. 10 white kids on video were racistly ugly to 10 non-white kids. So the white kids they're talking and they're showing pictures of the 10 non-white kids with that. So is it white privilege that they felt they could do this and nothing would happen to them? It was not hidden. I mean, all the technology is trackable. They were shown talking against this. And the things that were said against my coworker's daughter, she was just destroyed. So you could get 10 white kids that have the privilege to do this and think they can get away with it because they're white. I don't know that that's white privilege or just plain stupidity or just cruelty of our teenagers.
Well, clearly, I think the evidence shows that particularly with young Black males, that they are subject to being disciplined far more than white young men. I've heard a lot of people talk about this, about the cultural differences. I mean, you know, we white folk have a tendency to be, okay, shut up and sit down, be objective, you know, write out your paper. And I think there are aspects of Black culture that are more vibrant, more moving around, et cetera. I mean, that's a totally broad brush that I would not want to take anywhere with it. But it is true, I think, that particularly young or Black boys get hit with suspensions and so on. I also, you know, I was just going to say with the comment about there aren't many people of color. I thought a while back that, you know, in Portland, there really weren't that many people of color. Wrong. wrong, wrong, wrong. And it was like, they didn't enter my sphere. And of course, I made no effort to, I had no consciousness that there was another sphere. This is just, there aren't any Black people, maybe one or two and some Latino, etc. But anyway.
How did you discover that, Trish?
Wow. I think partially it was starting doing some of the public policy work.
Mm.
I also went to Portland State. This is, gosh, how many decades ago, but a decade. But I got a degree in social work and, conflict resolution. And I was just taken to different places that, this is an example, like Washington County. The schools there, if you walk into those schools, it's not just Black and Asian and Latino. It is Lao and Thai and, it's people from Ghana and people from South Africa. And it's just, it's give it a shot. It is absolutely amazing. It was eye-opening. Anyway, I had some experiences like that with SEIU. I don't know if you guys self-enhancement. I did some work with them. Anyway, I think to some degree one has to kind of get out of one's comfort zone and see what's out there. And, also, boy, did I make mistakes. Oy, 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 oy. In terms of some of the things I would say, or like, me, guys. I'm kind of like okay, let's work this out. I'm going to lead this group. Let's get this figured out. That isn't every communication style that's out there. So you see, now you can squash me whenever you want, Trish. But how do you experience white privilege in your community? Yeah, Nadine.
I was just going to say, we take for granted because, whites are different in every state also. The white culture in every state is a little different also. And we take for granted that Hispanic culture or what our Black culture is the same cross country, and it's not true. Yeah. You'll find that almost all the states have the Blacks in all the different states will have a slightly different culture. The Indian culture, I don't know that much here because I had very little to do with it, but and that's simply because of lack of bumping into. But when I think part of our conversation shouldn't be so monolithic, racial, but really talking about how it does change and the different emphases. Because for me, a New York Black person is not the same as someone from Tennessee or South Carolina. They just aren't. Or New Jersey. Somebody from North Jersey is definitely not the same as Southern Jersey. Whether you're Black, white, purple, or green, they're going to just start off at a different point. And I think that's something when we start talking about diversity, we should keep in mind is it really is diverse.
Mm-hmm.
One thing in response to what the incident Sue, it's Lisa talking.
Okay.
In response to what Sue was saying, that with the kids who were the white kids who were trash talking other kids, some of that is teenage stupidity. Some of it they're probably modeling on what they've heard at home. And is it white privilege? I don't know. Do they get in trouble for it? Are there going to be consequences for the kids who did that?
Oh, dang right there are going to be. Yeah,
well,
Grants Pass High School has a no tolerance, and it's on video. So
yeah.
But I'm going to follow this very strongly and do everything I can to support my coworker's daughter. Absolutely.
Yes. But that's part of it is what they might have been, what those kids might have been able to get away with
10 or 20 years ago, and part of white privilege, it's harder to get away with it. I think they still do, depending upon the school, depending upon the administrators, even with policies. So I really do hope that they get the book thrown at them.
Well, I guess I would say all of us have benefited from white privilege. Every single one of us. Maybe some more, some less. I mean, I certainly came from very humble, I lived in New York City with my mother in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and we had absolutely no money, and she was sick. I mean, I came from some humble, background, but I was white. I spoke the language. My mother was educated. She could get a job at McGraw-Hill. There are these built-in advantages that benefited me greatly. Just my being articulate. Obviously I blow it sometimes, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to brag. But I'd like to go into our small groups again. And I guess it's a two-part question. How have you personally realized you benefited from white privilege? And what should we do about it? What can we do about it? Minor questions, but really important ones. And I don't expect us to come up with the answers. I think, as in all of these, grappling with it, really putting yourself in the place of realizing, what we do is normal. I mean, so Nancy, can you do your magic?
Was that enough time?
It's the type of thing you could just keep talking and talking about.
Yeah. But seeing Trish isn't feeling so well, I thought we wouldn't keep her too long tonight.
Are we back?
We're back.
Well, who would like to, instead of me going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, last off, whatever, retrograde, who would like to represent their group or just say something that kind of responds to that question? Don't all jump in at once. How have you experienced white privilege, and what, if anything, can
I'll jump in.
All right.
And it's what I was telling our small group. In the early 70s, we lived in Germany, and I went to a sensitivity training on an army base. We were not military. And I sat there with a number of white, but also a number of Black young mothers. And I was a young mother. And conversation, again, sensitivity training, was what I could hope for my white son. And it hit me between the eyes what the young Black women could reasonably hope for their Black sons. Ooh. And that really, and that's actually before white privilege was coined, but it was, I mean, I got it. I got the idea, and have certainly been aware of it very much so since then. Yeah, that really.
Yes.
Anyone else experience it? I mean, I think we all intrinsically experience it. Bessie, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, no, sorry. Well, what can we
I'll just speak for myself.
Okay.
I realized it when I was a teenager. I was telling my group, I worked in the bulb farms between the summer of 13 and 14 and 14 and 15. We had gladiolus bulbs fields along. Well, my dad knew the boss because he was his boss through another business. So I got thrown out into the fields to weed. So you're up at 5 a.m, and I was the only non-Latino in the weeding fields. And the young girl, the teenage girl, and going through the fields, I'd never done that type of work before. And I couldn't figure out why my rows always had less weeds than the others. Well, I finally paid attention and I'm seeing the guys' hands come in and tweak weeds out of my rope with it. So they were pitching it and helping to take care of me. And I had no idea. I didn't think about it as white privilege. I just thought, well, that's so cool. I mean, they never were inappropriate. And anyway, it taught me respect. And it's like, these are good people. But the second summer, I got moved up into the barn. So I learned how to cross-pollinate and some of the more advanced stuff. And none of the other guys were up there at all with it. So yeah, like white privilege or not, I don't know. But, I look back at it now and I think, okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, just another thing is I understand when I go in a store, I don't get followed. So, I mean, that's clearly white privilege. Even Obama talked about being followed in stores.
And remember when she went to Davos, that incredibly wealthy woman who I'm having a brain moment here.
I understand.
You know what I'm talking about. The
Oprah?
television, Oprah, when she went and they said, can you actually afford to buy this purse? And she actually could afford to buy the store.
Yeah.
That's the point. But it's exactly what you're saying, Marilyn. And that is, we walk through the world assuming that, as we said in our group, the policeman is my friend and he's going to help me. And if I have a problem, I'll go to the authorities and they'll be like, hey, let me try to work this out for you. And that is not the story that other people are told to their children.
So we don't get pulled over for driving while black.
Right, exactly.
I got pulled over for driving as white, but the black cop, both of them, these are two different times in DC. They both let me go without having to pay a ticket. They looked at my face and they said, "Oh, go."
Were you doing anything that you shouldn't have been?
Well, the one time I just missed the 45th stop sign. And
well,
so he must have been tagging along. But the second time, I went the wrong way on a one-way street. So that was bad. And
that's
I only
not
realized it was at
not
night.
quite the
and
same.
all of a sudden, all the cars were looking at me. So, but I tried real hard to get off the road. He said, "Didn't you realize?" And I said, "Yes, but what was I going to do? I was in the road. I was trying to get
white
out."
privilege. You got off.
I said, I got out. And he said, "Well, it's Christmas time. Why don't I give you a Christmas gift and you go home and you go where you have to go. No ticket." So there was white privilege. Yes, working really hard.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly experienced it in my criminal trial practice. I was an attorney. Boy, that's a whole chapter. Is there anything we can do? I mean, needless to say, I'm not suggesting that, we go out and, change things and, everything's going to be okay. But I was kind of wondering about, to the extent that there's a group, I don't know, a Black church, an organization that not going to teach them, but learn. That's hard to do. That is hard to do. Because to some degree, you're going to be perceived as, coming in to tell these people what to do. But I, think about it.
Well,
Maybe.
and with
Yep.
somebody else is starting up. One of the problems is that we do all, I think, when we're looking for friends and people to be with, we tend to look for people who are like us in at least some ways. I probably wouldn't, if I were looking for friends, I'm not going to be looking for a bunch of 20-year-old women.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And that's true on all levels. So you tend to hang out with your kind. And there are ways in which a Black woman of my age is going to be more like me than a 20-year-old white woman.
Absolutely. Good point. Absolutely. I would just, again, well, Marilyn, go ahead.
Well, I just think we need to use our white privilege on behalf of
Yeah.
others and working against the white supremacy system. It's systemic. And we do need to use our white privilege and use it well on behalf of those who don't have the privilege, because we have it, like it or not.
Which means we need to educate ourselves, which is kind of the other thing.
Absolutely.
The more we learn, the more we know, the more we're going to feel comfortable recognizing a situation and speaking up.
All right.
I think that's the best word, is to be comfortable. And you have to be comfortable in a room that's not full of white people, comfortable in a room where maybe foreign language is being spoken, just learning to be comfortable. And that takes time.
It does. I agree. I totally agree. But, you know, one of the things I just think about is there a is there a community organization, you know, like here in Portland, the Urban League? You know, anyone can join the Urban League.
Well, we had that African Films over at PCC Cascade, and that's sort of, and there's an African association that goes along with that, trying to promote education, and they have also discussions. It's a very active group. I haven't gotten involved in the discussions. I have just gotten involved in going over there. They just started now, you know, opening up, showing live film as opposed to always being on Zoom. And
well, you know,
that's one group. And that's
I'm sure there are groups. I'm sure there are groups in every one of our communities. So I just
well, you know, I just, this is Nancy. I just want to say that I've been thinking about this recently. I grew up in Tacoma and had Black friends and a lot of Black folks in my neighborhood and in my school, and moving to Oregon was kind of a shock. And then going home is kind of a shock. And so I was thinking the other day, you know, I haven't had a Black friend in a long time. And I think I'm, you know, going to rejoin the NAACP. There's nothing wrong with that organization. And in fact, white people have been members since it came into existence. So that's what we have here in the Albany Corvallis area.
It's a good example. That's a good example. Well, guys, as I started out, I think I told you I'm not quite on the top of my game. If it's all right with you, I would like to conclude. I really appreciate you being here. This is not an easy topic. And I mean, I think the only way is to get in there. This is not, you know, like, it's tough. It's guilt provoking. It's, wait a minute, I worked hard, you know, that kind of thing. I think that's natural. But I think centering this in some way or another could provide a lot of meaning. Not going in to say, okay, this is what you need to do, but just to go in there and learn. Just go in there and learn. Help out. So thank you very much. I really appreciated your comments. They were right on target. And I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do next. I think I want to get into the woke thing, because I think that's a fascinating area, which may involve more than one session. Does anyone have any thoughts about, should we do this every 6 weeks, every month, every 2 months?
Well, Trish, I do want to say that you are doing a session in April at the conference.
Okay. Well,
so
all right. Well, forget that. Forget that. We'll be thinking about it. Be thinking about it.
So let's look at maybe May-ish.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. I will see you in April and in May. Take care.